Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. The cheating husband. Draping the palu of my sari around my waist, I tucked the loose end of it into the petticoat to avoid getting ketchup and oil stains on it as I helped serve piping hot samosas, ordered fresh from Narula's bakery in Indiranagar, into the Corelle plates. The whiff of the spicy mint chutney I dolloped into each plate made my mouth water. Next, I served vegetable spring rolls, paneer tikkas, and semolina idlis flavored with mustard seeds and curry leaves into each plate, adding chicken tikkas into the plates for the two non-vegetarians in our group of friends. Said Mira, tasting the cream of mushroom soup from the ladle as she leaned over the stove where the soup had been simmering. Careful, darling, I said, grabbing her palu as it slipped down her shoulder and nearly licked the flames of the stove. You should tuck it in. Mira turned around, facing me as she smoothed her lavender chiffon sari. What do you think? The layered diamond necklace around her slender neck and the diamond studs in her ears shimmered under the bright kitchen lights. The makeup, expensive and excessive, had done its bit in covering the fatigue that comes from working long hours in an HR leadership position at an IT services multinational corporation. But it couldn't camouflage her dissatisfaction with nearly everything in her life, including her husband, who I thought doted on her. You look stunning, I lied. Beautiful sari, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. One thing Raj does well after years of practice, picking up the right gifts for me. You've trained him well. You know, Adi doesn't even know what the various fabrics of saris are, let alone buy a sari for me. There are many other things my husband, Aditya Gulati, does not know, including the surprise I've planned for him tonight, which he should be receiving any minute now. Oh, come on. So what if he can't buy a sari for you? He brings home enough money, she said, winking at me. Well, that's true. And an added incentive for what I was about to do tonight. I'm his only family, and the next in line to inherit his business empire should any misfortune befall him. I would have preferred to sit on one of the cozy couches in the living room, sipping wine with the rest of our friends, pretending to be interested in the gossip and the conversations. But if I didn't help in the kitchen tonight, as I usually did, when our fortnightly get-togethers were held at Mira's place, just like she helped when the parties were held at my place, everyone would notice. And tonight was not a night I would want to be remembered for behaving oddly in any way, however inconsequential. People adhered to patterns and routines unless something was on their mind. and there was absolutely nothing on my mind. Nothing I could talk about anyway. As we carried the plates to the living room to serve the 5 women, gazing hungrily towards the kitchen, and I accidentally glimpsed at the wall clock. My heart raced with the knowledge of the unfolding events at 211 Palm Springs. It was 9:02 p.m. He would be breaking into the house right about now, with his expert gloved fingers working the lock on the back door. The light click of the lock would go unnoticed by the 2 adults in the bedroom or in the bathtub, enmeshed in each other's arms, oblivious to everything except the immediate, stark sensations of the flesh. He would then go to one of the rooms and rummage through the drawers and the wardrobe for jewelry and other valuables, and keep at it until Adi, finally alerted by the strange noises coming from the adjacent room, would cover his toned body by a robe or a towel and go to the next room to investigate. My breath caught in my throat as I pictured the long-bladed dagger piercing Adi's torso, quick stab wounds, at least 5 of them. As the victim's wife, I'd receive a detailed post-mortem report, and my contact would receive the full payment only if the work was satisfactory. After finishing off Adi, he would then stifle the woman's impending scream with a hand over her mouth and a dagger in her heart. The spicy tang of the mint chutney flooded my mouth as I pictured blood splattering white walls, the police dubbing the double murder as a burglary gone horribly wrong, and closing the case after being unable to find any trace of the suspect at the crime scene or any other lead, even after months of the investigation. Just as Tanya, our plump, sari-clad friend with diamond-studded stubs for fingers, began waving her pudgy hands in the air and describing the sordid details of a high-profile divorce case her husband was working on, my phone began vibrating in my purse. Not my ordinary phone, but my burner phone, the one I'd bought recently for one specific purpose. My heart plummeted on seeing the name Sheila Sharma flashing on the screen. I'd saved the investigation agency's number by this name to avoid any suspicions at home, even if Adi had stumbled upon the phone by chance. I would have told him it was my new office phone. The subject was seen entering house number 211, Palm Springs, at 2 p.m. in the afternoon on March 19th. The subject and the female resident of 211 Palm Springs were seen on the balcony having drinks at 2:35 p.m. and embracing at 2:49 p.m. Holding hands, they went in towards the bedroom at 2:55 p.m. The subject emerged from the house at 4:45 p.m. and left the house in his car. There were many such reports I'd received in exchange for the total bill amount of rupees, 450,000 pound, I'd shelled out over 3 months. My husband was cheating with a much younger, unmarried woman who worked as a receptionist in his office. He hadn't yet brought up divorce, but I had a feeling it was on his mind, and he was looking for the best opportunity. While building up his courage to talk about it, I stepped into the cool air on the balcony and closed the sliding door behind me. "Hello," I answered the phone. "Mrs. Gulati," said a deep, cultured voice at the other end. I immediately recognized him as Mr. Aurora, the managing partner of the agency. But why would he call me himself? It was usually the manager assigned to my case who communicated with me. The protocol was that the secretary would first call me up and set up a meeting with the case manager at my convenient time. At the allotted time, she'd call me again and patch me into the call with the case manager. "Mr. Aurora," I said, "what's the matter? I'm really sorry to be calling you up at this time, and I apologize if this call has caused you any inconvenience." He paused. "I'm afraid I have some bad news." "What?" I blurted out. My mind was spinning. I had made the last payment to the agency a week ago and terminated our contract after receiving all the evidence they had collected over the past 3 months. Everything I needed to set my plan in motion. What could have possibly gone wrong? Mr. Aurora cleared his throat. "There was a mix-up at our end. The file and the evidence we gave you was for another case, not yours. It's a grave mistake, I know, and I personally take full responsibility. We are willing to refund your full amount." My knees buckled under my weight. What did he mean? Was my husband not cheating on me with the pretty receptionist? But even before I had hired the investigation agency, all the signs were there. Adi was returning home late every day, many a time with his clothes smelling like a woman's perfume. He was distracted and extremely possessive of his mobile phone, taking it with him to the toilet as if he needed it to wipe his ass. No, my husband was certainly cheating on me. All the signs were there. "I want the correct file," I said, finally finding my voice. "Of course," said Mr. Aurora, his voice heavy with relief. "I have it here with me. I can have it delivered to your office tomorrow morning. Would that be okay?" In my purse, my other mobile began vibrating. Why was Roy calling me at this hour? I had spoken to him 2 hours ago on my way to Mira's house. He knew I'd be occupied today, and how critical it was for everything to be perfect tonight. One call in one evening could be attributed to work discussions. We worked together, after all. But 2 calls on the night my husband got murdered could arouse suspicion. I groaned inwardly. "Sorry, did you say you have the file on your desk?" "Yes, I do." "Read it out to me." A pause. "Sorry, Mrs. Gulati. Transmitting this information over the phone." My head was exploding with fury, splotches of red blurring my vision. "Listen to me, Aurora. You fucked me by giving me the wrong information. I could sue you for lakhs of rupees. I could have your ass arrested. Read me the information right now, or you'll pay dearly for your mistake." I could hear his mind's machinery whirring over the mobile phone. "Aurora," I said in my best intimidating voice. "Just a minute, please," he said. Some papers rustled. "Your husband indeed is cheating on you, Mrs. Gulati." The address of the woman in question? "Yes," I said breathlessly. "C401, High Garden, Indiranagar." "The woman is—" "I'll call you back." I snapped the phone shut, holding my head between my hands. Mira. My best friend, Mira. Adi and Mira. I could not believe it. I was going to ask them to bring photographic evidence this time. I wouldn't believe just the report like I did the last time. With trembling hands, I dialed my contact's number. Maybe it was not too late for the couple in 221, Palm Springs, somebody else's cheating husband and his mistress. Maybe the dense Bangalore traffic had delayed my contact. Maybe call waiting. He was talking to somebody else. Fuck. Roy's name flashed on my mobile once again. "Hey, is everything okay?" I froze on hearing Myra's voice behind me. She had appeared silkily out of nowhere and was now standing less than 3 feet away. I gazed into her brown eyes, trying to find the answers to my questions. Was it really you who was having an affair with my husband? Why did you betray your best friend? All's well. I need to use the washroom," I said, sliding in through the door past her. I went directly into her bedroom and closed the door. 2 or 3 minutes was all I had before she became suspicious. I began rummaging through her jewelry box on the dresser. If she was the woman Adi was having an affair with, she'd be missing a leaf-shaped diamond stud, one of which I'd found between the bed and the mattress while changing the sheets in our guest room. So many earrings and rings and chains and gold and diamond. And the woman was still unhappy. Aha! There it was. A single leaf-shaped diamond stud. Just one. I closed the jewelry box quickly and went to the washroom to splash some water on my face. So it really was true, huh? My husband and my best friend. Unimaginable. I grabbed my burner phone from my purse and dialed my contact once again. Thankfully, this time he picked up on the second ring. "Ma'am," he said in his hoarse voice, "the work is done. I'm out of there." Everything went according to plan. I sat on the toilet seat and began hyperventilating. Somebody else's cheating husband and his mistress were dead, thanks to me. If I got rid of the burner phone, there still wasn't anything to link me to the murders. In fact, given that I had no idea who the victims were, there was no way the murders could be tied back to me. The investigation agency would keep quiet. I'd make sure of that. I'd pay the contact discreetly, as I'd originally planned. Anyway, he was a professional killer who wouldn't get caught. There was nothing else. Roy's name flashed on my mobile for the 3rd time in the past 10 minutes. Roy was my married colleague, my longtime friend, and now my lover for the past 6 months, ever since I began suspecting that Adi was cheating on me. He'd been such a source of comfort to me and had become a very special part of my life. Did I love him? I don't know. I certainly missed his ribald jokes and his infectious laughter, the confidence he exuded, and the affection he showered upon me, his sharp intelligence and his precise meticulousness when he wasn't around. Once I'd got rid of Audie, I looked forward to spending more time with Roy. Our first night together would be very special. I was sure of it. "Hello?" I answered. I was greeted by a sputtering sound. "Roy, are you okay?" I asked, alarmed. "I've been..." The rest of the sentence was wiped out by a fit of violent coughing. I stood bolt upright. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "Stabbed. I've been stabbed," he managed to blurt out. "What? Where? Have you called an ambulance?" he said when he stabbed me. "Roy!" I screamed into the phone. When he stabbed me, he said, "Courtesy of Mrs. Galati." My phone slipped through my fingers and clattered to the tiled bathroom floor. My first instinct was to scream, but I simply collapsed on the cold, hard floor. As the sound of the wailing police sirens pierced the night air, I stared bleakly out of the window, contemplating the swiftly approaching karmic retribution. The chance of a half-dead man and Dr. Jane White sound filled the living room as Jane struggled to find her TV remote. Soft pillows scattered all over the carpet, leaving a minimal space for Jane to stomp around angrily. She never liked the white sound. Haunting as it is, Jane tried to calm herself and collect memories of where she placed her TV remote. Her hand slips into the crease and the fold of her sofa, grasping at the empty space in between. Jane moved her hand slowly to the corner of her sofa, and her hand finally hit something. She grabbed the object and surprised when she saw it was her remote, aging with the dust that have reside inside her sofa, relieve. Welcome her as she turned the TV off, something heavy still tugging at her mind. If she hadn't been working so late, she might not miss her favorite show again this week. A soft tune started to pull her way from her tired mind. Jane rise to find her phone. Ugh, again? Why do I keep forgetting my things? Her lovely mother would be laughing at her for such silly behavior a doctor can have. Jane suddenly misses her. It's been 5 years since her mother passed away. Yet her laughter and smile still here with Jane. She hopes it will never fade away. Jane lifts her foot carefully to walk between the messy pillows, focusing herself on the tunes from her phone. One missed call had waited for her before another call struck. Jane was shocked that her cousin was the caller, for it was highly unusual of Charles to call late at night. Wave of panic came knocking before Jane braced herself to pick up the call. "Hello, Jane?" Charles's voice was shaky. Panic surged through Jane completely. "Charles, are you okay?" Jane started to walk away from her living room. I need help, Jane. Can you come to my house right now and bring your medical bag? Please, Jane. A lightning strike her heart, and Jane ran to her room upstairs. I'll be there. Don't worry, Charles. You're going to be okay. She hated to ask questions, especially the ones she knew she won't like the answer. Charles have a dire reason why to call Jane that night. They were close when they were kids. Their memories of childhood are blended together. Not a single memory without each other. Jane was driving at a high speed because the stream in her head won't stop worrying about Charles. She had tried to blur it out, just like every bloody wound she had to stitch, and every smile she had to put at the end of it all. She won't be okay at the end of the road for this, but being a doctor and a friend for Jane means more than her mental state. What become of it is that Jane can only feel the cold wind of the night. No more warmth. Every time she looked at the mirror, all she can think about is how dark her eyes are and what people might think happened to her when they saw it. Jane slowed down her car as she drives towards the house gate. For a businessman, Charles was very successful. Family and friends never knew what he was selling or buying to be this rich, almost drowning in his own gold, really. The gate automatically moved to open up a path for guests. Optical sensors and cameras cover every inch of the house entry, watching its newcomer every day. Authentic English patterns made the dark metals of the gate seem stronger, unbreakable. Solid walls keeping the vulnerable secrets safe within. Smoke diffused and expanded from his cigarette as Jane watched an old man waiting for her at the lobby. A familiar face running close behind him. Charles. Quick! Chandelier lights glimmer above. Its reflection made Jane's dark red hair burns with shades of amber. Jane rushed inside the grand house, certain of her steps, diving into the role of Dr. Jane again. Blood trails all over the white marble of the house. Charles lead the way into a dark hall, then down the stairs. The room was more like a morgue than a basement, or maybe a combination of both. Jane can't tell why Charles has this odd room. She was expecting a knife cut, or maybe a sprained ankle, rather than a grim room that smelled of blood and alcohol. Charles seemed fine and had no difficulties in movement when Jane saw him. Another man had been waiting instead of those images of Charles hurting. His skin was pale despite having a bronze tone. Bluish shade of his lips and under eyes removed the warmth of a living man. He had lost a lot of blood. Jane began to worry that he might not survive. Charles held the man's hand as he waited for Jane to prepare her kit. The mysterious man was bare-chested. Someone tore his shirt to press it on his wounds. No! I forgot my suture. I can't patch him up. I got it. Anything that you need. Here. Charles pointed at a small white cupboard not far from him. Through the glass, Jane saw a complete collection of basic surgical equipment. She stopped for a moment, wondering how come a normal businessman own a complete surgical equipment. Maybe countless times he had been in this situation. Jane, hurry, please. The word struck like a punch in the face. Jane does not want to let her suspicion rise and get the best of her. The mysterious man needed Dr. Jane, and that is what he will get. Jane laid all the medical equipment on the table next to the surgical bed. One thing was missing from Charles's collection: the anesthetic. You don't happen to have any anesthetic, do you? Jane feared the answer to her own question. His ocean eyes moved from left to right in distress, trying to figure something out, debating a will within himself. A simple head shake is what he gave in the end. Jane tried to collect herself and keep a steady state, both for herself and Charles. She hates to see someone hurt, and she hates to be the one doing the hurting. There's no one in the room but the three of them. That gave Jane an unexpected relief. Slowly, and one by one, she overcome the surgery. Aseptic conditions before reaching for the gloves and mask. Deep breaths before examining the wound. A small pause before sanitizing it with iodine. The brown liquid trickled down from each sides of the wound. His right shoulder was the first one she cleaned, then the one above the abdomen, a little to the left, almost to the heart. Whoever struck this man have planned the attack, explicitly to weaken this man before struck his heart. Jane examined the red line on his shoulder. It was clean. Very sharp object. Not too wide, not too deep. The angle of it looked like there was a struggle before the object wounded his skin. A gash under his eyes said the same thing, but the object seems to be blunt. Bruises accompanied his jaw and cheekbones. As the time passed by, Jane worried that his features will match his bruises. If she can be fast enough, maybe this man will live. Jane started to understand the rhythm of Charles's breathing. He was so still when Jane punctured the first needle to stitch the man's right shoulder. Then Charles started to ease up when she moved to the next wound, closing each bloody gap, step by step. All the hours spent at the hospital always meant something to her. It is not only to fix physically, but also mentally. People got attached to so many things in their life. Countless things. They can't properly heal until there is nothing left but the old traces of scar. As a surgeon, Jane always felt she fixed people, gave them a help to heal. Fixing and giving, that is all there ever was. Helping people to find their strength again. grow from their experience. She was there when a mother cried for her dead son, taken too soon after 5 years of battling leukemia. She was there when a single father decided to permit donation of his son's organs. The son died of car crash. She had failed to save their child, but she was there to help them heal too. She told them of how their child fight for them, thinking of their family at their last moments. There are times when Jane gave a mother her newborn conjoined twins, separated by surgery, but all well and healthy. They will have a scar forever, but that scar will be a reminder of their fight, even before they can remember. Jane had been a part of that. She was more than glad to be a part of that. Mother always told her to help people. Do everything from the bottom of her heart, genuine and certain. Believe that there will be a relief for every difficulty. As the last stitch sealed, Jane released a slow breath. She placed clean pieces of bandage over the man's wound. Though not as pale as he once was, the man was laying still and unconscious on the table. He might wake soon after this. Make sure he's hydrated. No alcohol, Charles nodded, his eyes distant. He's holding his breath, waiting for the moment when the mysterious man finally opened his eyes. Charles looks almost drowning in fear. Something glinted in his eyes, something Jane never seen before. One question: what happened? Jane hated the question. It would be easier for her if Charles just spill everything. They both know it won't happen. Jane took her gloves and mask off, avoiding Charles's eyes. Still, she wanted to hear everything in its full truth. You know I can't. You don't want to get involved more than you already are. His eyebrows creased. Anger and regret rise up in him at the same time, waiting for Charles to open the door and release them. For so many reasons, he deserves to feel that way tonight. Okay, it's obvious, Charles. Her eyes darted to him. Jane realized tears had gathered in his eyes and slowly spilling out. What do you mean? Charles ran a hand through his hair. Memories, uninvited, flashing in his brain. If you're going to play game of secrets, so be it. There is a long and dangerous story behind this. Jane, sure of it. It is not her place to push Charles. A shallow understanding came for her, like leeches. Heavy for now, but light for later, she thought. He got some deep wounds. He barely makes it. At least, if you care about him, you'll need me again. What had the help meant? What was the urging reason for a woman to save a mysterious, half-dead man in the middle of the night? Something in her awakened. A warrior, ready to take everything by the tip of her spear. Jane saved a man. She will give him medications, help him gain his health again, a chance to build again. Jane fear the chance will take chances. Can it be real? Had she just saved a criminal's life? What does the fixing and giving means now? Stream of thoughts had preceded her kind intentions, leaving the cold and soundless room behind her. Jane walked away. Rayner Kelly's murder soulmate. People are fools. This was a thought he'd held on to since he was a boy, and it had held true for his entire life till that point, even as Rayner drove on the roads of his favorite mountain range. He could only think back to the sorts who proved it to him, those sorts of people he couldn't even be angry at, the kinda idiots that got themselves lost in his favorite places. It wasn't as if he cared for any particular demographic. He liked to hurt them more if they were pretty, more so if they were tame. But he was always one for opportunity. That might have been how he managed his body count. Serial killers without a known type are harder to catch, as far as he'd heard. Though, considering how high the body counts were for easier cases, he had his reservations. It could have been how he killed. While he wasn't exactly messy, he didn't try to be fancy with his targets. He'd done it before. Long, drawn moments with strangers in discreet, abandoned places. But when all was said and done, he was careful. That, and he was a fairly big guy. He was a hard man to escape, made his marks all the more foolish for trusting him. It wasn't all that late when he happened upon his next mark. A young man, inching to it, really, with a lovely mop of hair just by the side of the road. "Hello, sir. I kinda sprained my ankle. Could you drive me to a gas station or something?" the kid asked softly. He looked embarrassed by the entire situation. Rayner liked that, so he opened his passenger door for him. The kid was asking, after all. He watched as the kid arranged himself on the passenger side, careful to buckle himself in. The kid seemed a mite more cautious now, considering his ankle. Rayner started after that, taking his merry time, since the kid wasn't worrying directions. "So, what had you so far out?" Rayner asked with a sideways glance. The kid had been looking out the window, contemplating something, before glancing over to him. "Oh, nothing much, just the scenery," the boy said. "Is it all right if I do some writing here? I don't exactly have a charging setup," Rayner said, still playing the Samaritan. The kid took out a small journal. "Sorry to disappoint. I'm a bit old school," he said, trying to look cool. He kinda did if Rayner were at all honest. Rayner could have driven with his eyes closed, but he still only looked over occasionally, seeing the kid scribble away on a relatively clean page in his book. "So, what do you like to write about?" "Bodies." "Oh, what kind of bodies?" he asked innocuously. "Anybody, anything." "Oh," he said, hoping for something more specific. It was well enough that the kid was mostly quiet after that. Rayner wasn't so over-curious of this next body. Couldn't be that clever this far out. Didn't stop him from being a bit disappointed with the answer, what they were, rather than the state they were in. He was still a bit mesmerized with the kid, scratching away on a half-empty journal he was never gonna fill. He wondered, like any man oughta, how the kid managed to see anything past his fringe. But it seemed weird to impose on something like that. That mop would be safe enough to cut when the kid was dead, if he was really in the mood for a trophy. Beyond that, it was the kinda night he wanted to take slowly. The kid was marked for it. Rayner liked to take it slow sometimes. I still gotta wonder what got you out so late. I thought I told you. Oh, whatever, the kid whispered, before asking, is it all right to say I've got terrible friends? Well, hey, we've all been in bad crowds before, Rayner stated. He liked getting him out of the shell before the fun. Yeah, Rayner couldn't see where the kid was looking. I don't think I caught your name. No, you didn't. Be fair, I didn't catch yours either. Ah, I'm Callum. Let me guess. Your mom had a thing for soap operas? No, saints, actually, the kid corrected with a laugh. My mom had a thing for cryptids. Rayner paused at the non sequitur, thinking over what to say. He could be honest, tell the kid his name, hear that begging catch on his throat later. Or he could lie, make him guess. It won't matter if I don't know your real name, you know, the kid said, catching his apprehension. Rayner stopped to think about where they were, where the closest safe house was, before saying, no, I was just surprised. I'm Rayner Kelly. Because he liked the kid's voice. The kid was quiet after that, the only noise from the passenger side being the press of pencil to paper, the sound of a zipper. Then, as if struck by something, he felt a sharp presence through his leg, reacting with a hit to the face, which knocked the kid out. Without much thought as to the proper thing to do, Rayner pulled the knife out. Rayner felt his own hot blood flow from his thigh, and all he could think was, the little maniac stabbed me. He looked down at his leg, realizing that the kid, with all the luck, nicked something proper. He stole the kid's belt, since he was still out, and made a tourniquet. Frazzled by the entire ordeal, he decided to push the kid out the passenger side and step it to the nearest hospital. A night held up in the emergency room was an interesting addition to his night, just as the injury to his femoral artery was. It was a lucky break, not dying from it, but the kid was still out there. He'd done something foolish, and while Rayner wasn't especially scared of getting caught, he didn't like being blindsided like that. It would be a while after that before he'd think of it again. When he cleaned out his car, Rayner, having killed on the go before, knew that anything could drop from a body. Licenses, gum, IDs, and phones were some of the most incriminating. So he really couldn't afford to keep a dirty car. That's when he found the journal, the last thing the kid dropped before trying to get the drop on him. It was a small, leather-bound notebook, and while at once familiar in the light of day, he could see the character of its use. Kid was careful closing it before pulling that nonsense. And while his car had been a mess for a while, the pages were mostly clean. He flipped through, looking for IDs that might incriminate. And when he couldn't find any, he thought to throw it away, even without something concrete. The book was filled with the kid's writings, and being by hand, his composition and identity could be ascertained. It was the kind of circumstantial evidence detectives and juries ate up. With the car no longer in disarray, he could throw it out, forget about the one night where the tables almost turned altogether again. He thought of the journal, of his hands and head. This was all he was gonna have of that. And for once, amongst the dark thoughts and bad memories, he wanted to keep it. It was only then did he read it, page upon page of poetry. And though it was the simplest thing it could be, he was infatuated with it. The first page, dated a decade before, I am beauty. I am soft, a crooked rumble to strange human love. She wonders fondly, where are you, dear? While I am dry and rotting here. I am claws. I am fear, a hissing mess to his cruel intent. I am flesh. I am bones. The kid was killing cats back then, writing poetry about it even. Rayner was taken back to his first experiments, neighborhood pets, and the like he dispatched out of curiosity. Though the kid never wrote his age or full name in any of them, he could tell that it was quite a bit more than poetry. It was something he'd never thought to do. Write about them with this intense distance. Some were short and recent. I am small. I am buzzing. My life is sweet. My stripes are fuzzy. Inside, I'm soft. My stingers not. None are things the dead can flaunt. Before he knew it, he felt familiar with the kid, like he was more than a liability, as close as a journal scratched halfway through. It really was anything, anybody to him. I am lovely. I am strong. My tendons were cut. My fat is gone, lost beneath 2 or 3 feet. There are no feelings the dead get to keep. Rayner thinks, reading through Callum's poetry book, about that night and how it went. Every little lie that he didn't bother telling. How ready he was after saying his name. He wonders, what'll I do when I'm on the prowl again? Hungry for new pretty faces. How long before he thinks about the kid as just a liability again? And not the one that got away. The prankster, Lennox, was the golden child to a set of loving mother and father who believed her to be the most auspicious thing that ever happened to them. They never reprimanded her for her childish pursuits, let alone denied her anything she ever wanted. An army of helpers were always at her beck and call. She pulled immature pranks and toyed with them to her heart's content. Her impishness was further encouraged by her parents, who laughed it off her as a sign of childishness and immaturity. Asher, Freddie, and Sarah were all Lennox's best friends. They belonged to well-off families and were as unruly as Lennox. They were all indifferent to the pain their actions might cause to the person at the receiving end. A boy named Austin was the current target of Lennox and her gang. Austin lived in the servant quarters along with his father, who was a driver at Lennox's house. He was a nerdy and ambitious kid who wanted to support his father when he grew up. Lennox often instigated him to join her gang, but he politely refused. because he was aware of the activities they indulged in. This made Lennox despise him, and she decided to hit him where it hurts. She stole the extra key of the servant quarters from her mother's bedside drawer and located the books she often saw Austin reading passionately. She set all of the book on flames, which left poor Austin crying bitterly. This was just one incident of the many that followed. Once Lennox's parents shrugged it off as a mistake. With the passage of time, Lennox became more obstreperous and even started talking back to her teachers when they rebuked her for her rebelliousness. Her partners in crime always did as she said and supported her in her petty pursuits. One day, Lennox was playing catch with her friends. One of her friends dared her to throw the ball as high up in the sky as the overhead rooftop of the adjoining house. Lennox, being the competitive girl she was, immediately accepted the challenge and flung the ball with all her might. But the wall hit the glass casement of the house, resulting it to crash into pieces. Lennox had failed to complete the dare. She headed towards the house to collect the ball, fuming with anger. She rang the doorbell. It was answered by an elderly woman whose gray hair was neatly tied in a bun. She was wearing a thick-rimmed black frame containing bifocals. She gave Lennox a sneering look and remarked angrily, "You broke my window, you insolent little brat. You will never get that ball. Get out of here. Shoo!" She shut the door with a loud thud that made Lennox flinch. Lennox returned to her house with her cheeks turned crimson red with anger and embarrassment. Her friends, who bore witness to the whole scene, were snickering at her, adding insult to the injury. "I'll make the old hag eat her own words and beg for forgiveness." She vowed to exact vengeance on the poor old woman who was her next target. The next morning, Lennox and her gang hatched a devious plan that would extinguish the fire of revenge ignited inside Lennox's heart. They dug up some information on the old woman and found out that she lived alone in that big house. They had decided to make a fool out of the poor old woman by making her come to a realization that her house is haunted. They made their way towards the old woman's house in order to execute their seemingly flawless plan. Everyone hid behind the car, parked right outside the house. According to the plan, Asher ran towards the house and rang the doorbell as many times as he possibly could, and Quickie joined his friends, who were hiding behind the car. A few minutes later, the old woman poked her head out of the gate and muttered something under her breath when she didn't find anyone standing on the other side of the door. She shut the door with all her might, which made a loud, banging sound. Lennox felt amused at her frustration. This process was repeated thrice till the old woman was heaving tiresome breaths and sat on the pavement outside the house with beads of sweat forming on her forehead. She bent down and struggled to pick up her staff, which showed clear signs of exhaustion. A few moments after she went back into the house, Lennox declared that she would bang on the door this time, instead of ringing the doorbell. She headed towards the gate and started banging on the door with all her might. A few moments later, she heard a loud thud and the sound of a piece of wood falling on the ground. Curious to find out what had happened, she looked through the peephole of the gate and gasped as soon as she saw the old woman lying flat on the ground, along with her staff that had a significant tear in it as a result of impact with the ground. Lennox immediately rushed towards her house and narrated the whole incident to her mother in one breath. Her mother was shocked. "I am very disappointed in you, Lennox. I have always ignored your childish pranks because I thought you will eventually learn on your own that it is not okay to hurt people just for a few laughs." Her mother reprimanded her while calling the nearest hospital for an ambulance. The old woman was rushed to the emergency room. The doctors revealed that she had minor heart attack as a result of a strenuous activity. Lennox came to the hospital every single day to see the old woman, but she didn't have the guts to meet her. After a week, she finally found the courage to make amends for her mistake. She bought a colorful bouquet, a brand new staff for the old woman. When she arrived at the hospital, she came to know that the woman had left the country with her son, who had recently come from Italy. Lennox fell down on her knees and started sobbing. At that moment, she vowed to never pull pranks on anyone. She returned home and apologized to Austin and all the other people she had wronged throughout her life. Moral: in an attempt to satiate our ego, we often end up hurting people beyond repair. Bloody hands. The night was pitch black because the moon was too shy to come out from the clouds. With a restless heart, I stood there, waiting for my brother. I knew what I am doing is a sin, but sometimes the path of sin is the only path forward. I agreed to this for Mom. She really needs my help. I broke the window. Come on, it's time. I have a bad feeling about this. Don't you want to help Mom? He always uses the mom card. Do I love my mom? Yes, I do. But that doesn't mean what we're doing is right. Because of his dumb idea, we're sitting right outside a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere. A simple mistake could derail our whole plan. Mom needed money, and she was never going to ask me for help. But I wanted to help her. She has done enough for me. Maybe more than enough. Being a single mom in this patriarchal world is pretty painful. I know that. That's why I asked my 1 minute older twin brother for help. Never did I think he would come up with a plan for a heist to save the family. Mom will have a heart attack if she finds out about this. She won't know about this. I swear on Dad. He talked as if he knew what I was thinking. Whoa, calm down. I will go in. We never talk about our dad unless it's necessary. So I knew he was serious. he always comes up with all these stupid ideas that get me in trouble. But Mom thinks it's me who does all this. But this time, he might be on to something. But I think the same thing every other time until things start to go sideways. Yet, I was ready to take the chance one more time. I opened the door and went inside the dark kitchen. The whole place was filled with a foul smell. If my expert brother is correct, a man lives in this house alone with a priceless gold chain of his ancestors. Many have seen him roaming around in his courtyard with the chain around his neck. I just have to find him, sedate him with chloroform, and steal the chain. If I am lucky enough, he will be sleeping with the chain around his neck. Just take it and leave while slowly sneaking towards the bedroom. I looked back to make sure my brother was behind me. I stopped in the middle of the dark room when I saw a hammer in his hand. What's that? Nothing. It's just for protection. As I stood there, unsatisfied with his answer, the lights went on. The next thing I heard was a man screaming in fear. While I looked around to find the source of the scream, I heard a bang. A strange man fell onto my arms with a bleeding head. His helpless eyes reminded me of someone I knew. Dad? As I was trying hard to figure out what was going on, I heard my brother's voice coming from the door. With a bloody hammer in his hand, he was screaming, "Come on, let's go." As I started to run, following my brother, I knew things have gone wrong. I could feel the warmth of the blood splattered all over my face and clothes. Slowly, my vision began to blur. I could no longer see my brother. Darkness covered my eyes. I continued to run into the dark path in front of me. After running for some time, I reached my house. I got in through the back door, just like I did at that stranger's house earlier. I felt the guilt growing inside me. I should find my brother. I searched the whole house for him, but he was not there. Where has he gone? I need him. I tried hard to bottle up my emotions so I won't wake up my mom. She was sleeping. After working all day long for me, she deserved the rest. She needed the sleep. I searched for my phone to call my brother. I need him now. The eyes of the man began to haunt me. I could feel my mind going out of control. I couldn't handle it. The phone was not in my pocket. It was there. It was there when I went inside the man's house. It must have slipped out. I bit hard on my arm to feel some pain. I fucked up big time. Mom's going to lose it when the police come for me. She won't take it. She can't take it. I began to hear sirens from far away. Where is my brother? Where is he when I need him? I felt a sudden weight in my left arm. It was the hammer, soaked in warm blood. Wasn't it in his hands? I saw him run away with it. How did it get here? My head began to spin. I could hear the sirens getting louder. The police are coming for me. They will drag me away from my mom. They are going to make her sad again. I won't let that happen. She doesn't deserve that. She doesn't deserve any of this. Free her. Free her from the pain you will cause. The pain she is about to feel. I could hear my twin brother again in my head. He always comes up with all these bold ideas that get me in trouble. But this time, I think he is on to something. As I moved towards my snoring mom, I could hear the sirens nearing. I can't let them take me away from my mom. I smelled her beautiful black hair with the soothing smell of jasmine. I lifted the hammer as my brother told me. With a full swing, I bashed the hammer into her head. All of a sudden, the sirens in my head went silent. I stood there, looking at my hands, covered in my mom's warm blood. The big crime investigators at the Gustav Adolf Lutheran Church in New Sweden, Maine. In 2003, a mass poisoning there sickened more than a dozen congregants, killing one. Credit: Joel Page, Associated Press, by The New York Times, April 7th, 2020. All true crime stories start as crime reporting, often in the daily newspaper. Before the narrative is shaped for your streaming device, earbuds, or bookshelf, the facts are gathered by a journalist. What happened? Where and when? Who is the victim? And do the police know who did it? Any journalist who has covered crime has stories they can't shake. These tales can be harrowing, bizarre, or even, in rare circumstances, oddly inspirational. We asked our journalists to share the ones they still think about, even decades later. Ellen, Barry, Boston, bureau chief. Someone put arsenic in the coffee after a church service in New Sweden, Maine, sickening several congregants and killing one. I was sent up there in 2003 by the Boston Globe to the far reaches of Aroostook County. It was both quaint and horrific. Someone trying to kill their neighbors. Eventually, it emerged that one of the ushers had done it, as revenge for losing a theological battle. As the population in that area drained away, two small Lutheran churches were consolidated into one. Identical to outsiders, the two churches had what was for them a deeply significant doctrinal difference. In one, the priest faced the congregation when blessing the host. In the other, the priest faced the altar. The poisoner had lost that battle. He ultimately killed himself. It was a grim story about the dilemmas of those stretches of our country that are losing population, having to let go of their particular identity. Have a true crime story to share? Tell us about the crime that haunts your memory. Feb 27, 2020. Linda Richardson, Senior Staff Editor. Travel. Eddie Brown began running in a snake-infested Florida swamp in 1952. In the 44 years after he escaped from a chain gang while serving a robbery sentence, Mr. Brown worked, raised children, and lived quietly in East New York. But he was always shadowed by the gnawing fear that his past would catch up with him. I covered his case as a Metro reporter in 1996. But lately, I've been thinking a lot about the chain gang fugitive, having recently read about the racial horrors of the Jim Crow South in Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. Eddie Brown's past resurfaced after he was in a minor car accident, and the police ran a routine check that showed he was wanted in Florida. He was taken away in handcuffs. Florida initially requested his extradition, and New York law enforcement officials began the proceedings. Mr. Brown spent nearly 40 days in the Brooklyn House of Detention before he was released on $1,000 bail. It was an immensely satisfying moment to see him walk out of the courthouse, finally a free man, as a sea of news photographers with flashing cameras and reporters, more than I've ever seen, awaited him. Dig deeper into the moment. Special offer. Subscribe for $1 a week. Dan Barry, domestic correspondent. When I worked for the Providence Journal many years ago, I often wrote about the mobsters who were very much present in that Rhode Island city. You knew that this was Social Club, this was Baby Shanks's cafe, and this was the place where Old Man, the boss, used to run everything. You also knew that two men connected to a certain restaurant had made a guy named Joe Onions disappear long ago, but had never revealed where they had laid him to rest. Fast forward to 2008. One of the men is dead, and the other is dying. The police pick him up on a nickel and dime charge and ask for the umpteenth time, where is Joe Onions buried? To their shock, he agrees to spill. I have strong ties still to the state, and when I heard about this case, it sounded like a short story about an old wise guy who decides to go out by doing the right thing. I had to write it. Nicholas, domestic correspondent, investigations. The century-old department store stands 8 stories tall, but looms even larger in the German consciousness. A short walk from the old New York Times bureau where I worked in West Berlin, the luxurious shopping destination is a symbol both of Berlin's roaring 20s and the country's post-war economic miracle. So when I learned that there had been a jewelry heist, with the thieves caught on the surveillance camera, lowering themselves into the store on a rope ladder, evading the motion detectors, and making off with millions of dollars worth of jewels, I knew it was a big crime story on the biggest stage. My contacts in the Berlin Police Department told me that the thieves had made just one mistake, leaving behind a glove at the scene with DNA inside. A good story needs a twist, but a great story boasts two. The DNA evidence led not to a single suspect, but a pair, identical twins, identified as 27-year-old Hassan and Abbas O. The German justice system couldn't lock them both up, and each could claim the other did it. So, they walked. It may not have been the perfect crime, but it was a pretty sweet alibi. Alan Reporter. Metro. A Bronx man spent 25 years in prison for a rape he did not commit. Why? Because a witness accidentally took the police to the wrong apartment, one not 16, and the police arrested and prosecuted the man they found there. Fernandez, Houston, Bureau Chief. One night in 2006, a police officer in the Bronx responds to a fight at a White Castle. He rolls up and sees a man with a gun kneeling over another man in the parking lot. He tells the gunman to drop the weapon, but the gunman doesn't respond. The officer opens fire, and the gunman is critically wounded and later dies. The gunman, it turns out, was a fellow officer, an off-duty Bronx policeman who was intoxicated and had just been beaten up by a group of guys at the White Castle. It's the mistaken identity that gets me. You can freeze frame the shooting as the bullets in the air and study it. There are worlds upon worlds of fate, mystery, and human connection at play. These two officers worked at station houses nearly 2 miles apart, and yet here they were, drawn together in a few tense, confusing seconds in a fast food parking lot. As I wrote, in this city, people live their whole lives separated by such short distances and never once cross paths. I don't think the officer was ever prosecuted for the shooting. I think it was ruled a justified shooting. But how does a cop live with a thing like that and move on? Yes, 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 yes. Armando, Deputy Editorial Director, Syndication. Hi, 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 hi. This unsolved case, in which 7 people, including children, were shot point blank during a robbery inside a bowling alley, has been a cloud over a small New Mexico city near the Mexican border for decades. 4 of the victims were killed. A 12-year-old victim, shot in the head, managed to call 911. And no arrests have ever been made. I grew up in the area, and it has been a source of sorrow and local mythology ever since it happened in 1990. In fact, the brutality of this crime over a few $1,000s, the massive law enforcement response, and the fact that no credible witnesses have ever come forward to identify suspects, all we want to hear about a crime that haunts you, a story that shook you, your town or community, and possibly changed lives. We are starting a project that will deeply examine crimes around the United States, the kinds of stories that too often go untold or have largely been forgotten. The crimes can be solved or unsolved, decades in the past or more recent. The crime may have been violent or involved financial or political wrongdoings. It may have implicated law enforcement or corporations. We're particularly interested in stories that may have gotten local coverage or not, but didn't rise to national consciousness. Unoccupied guest rooms were always hiding things. No one starts out wanting a guest room. It's usually an office first, but then you got fired and can't look at it anymore, so you throw a bed in it that you'll never sleep in. Sometimes it's a kid's room, but they've moved out into a college dorm room. It used to be storage, but then the divorce happened, leaving it depressingly empty. A studio for recording music, but the bass player was in a car accident, and the band broke up. Guest rooms are rarely ever intentional. It's more of a ritual, something society has deemed necessary. The presumption that someone wants to stay with you and your new husband. The poor friend grits their teeth, trying to pretend they can't hear you having sex, trying to make the stiff pillows into something they actually want to lay on, trying to breathe through the Yankee Candle Vanilla Wafer air freshener that's plugged into the wall. The window sticks after an inch, and they can't get it up all the way. They unplug it after everyone is asleep. But the smell has been cloistered in the room for so long that it will never smell like anything else. They put the pillow on top of their face and try to sleep. I stood in the doorway to this guest room without entering it. Untouched rooms give you answers. They offer secrets. This one had last been occupied by a dead girl lying face down in a pool of blood. I found out about the case through the police. That never happened. We didn't get along. Yeah? I barked into phone. A landline I had installed myself. Cell phones bothered me. Is this Alma? It was Detective Herbert Ross. He knew it was me. What did you want? I said, trapping the phone between my ear and shoulder as I took a kettle of hot water off the stove and poured it in my favorite chipped mug with my favorite raspberry tea. If this was about the parking tickets I'd never paid, I still wasn't going to pay them. If this was to call me in about the robbery I solved before them, I wasn't going to tell them how I did it. A girl's dead. I set the kettle down a little too hard. Hot water sloshed around inside. I stared at the swirling steam coming up from the cup. I wouldn't be able to drink it now, and I frowned. The cops never called for my help. I usually embarrassed them by figuring their cases out for them. As a PI, it was rare to get a call like this. You need me? Yeah. Can you come? I hesitated for only a moment. Yeah. What's the address? 325 111th Ave, Blaine. I'll be there in half an hour. I hung up and reached for the tea, hoping I could snag one sip. Burnt tongue be damned. The tea bag had broken. Blaine was a little forgotten neighborhood, 30 minutes from Minneapolis, where I lived. The town used to be nice and neighborly, where kids biked until dark and people shoveled driveways for the elderly. Now, it was dirty. Every house had this gray dinginess to it, like everyone had collectively decided 1 year to stop taking care of things. Lawns were overgrown. Cars were rusting away. Big lilac bushes and weeping willows were being taken out or cut down. It was like an anti-homeowners association, uglifying until everything was up to code. I showed up to the house where only one police car remained. There was yellow tape in front of the door. A crowd of people stood a few feet away, muttering. I looked the crowd over quickly, but no one stood out. I lifted the tape and went into the house. Herbert was standing right inside, apparently waiting for me. Body has already been taken. He grunted. That's fine. I didn't get much from dead bodies. I knew Herbert would tell me anything I needed to know, because he had called me. Still, this was awkward. We both were uncomfortable, and it was obvious by how we refused to make eye contact, our hands shoved in our pockets. Husband found her face down in the guest room, stabbed multiple times, said the doors were all locked, no sign of forced entry. You ask the neighbors if anyone was skulking around? Herbert nodded. Nothing out of the ordinary. Seems like everyone keeps to themselves. What did she do? Who? The victim. What did she do for work? Oh, her name's Noelle Sharp. The writer? I asked, bewildered. She was known for gritty romance novels, turned deadly. Not my thing, but I knew her name. Yeah, I didn't know she lived here. He nodded again. They moved here a few years ago. Geez, why? Herbert shrugged. Husband, name Magnus, works for a painting company. She seems to make more dough. Where is he? Already down at the station. Guy's pretty numb. Won't say much. Yeah, well, his wife was murdered. I wondered if Magnus had convinced Noelle to move here. If he had done that thing that men do when they feel like their wife, or any woman, really, was doing better than them. So he tried to put her in a box, make her talents and abilities small and manageable, easy to swallow. How many shouting matches had they been through before Noelle had conceded to move into this shitbox in the middle of Shitsville? Can I have a few minutes? I asked. Herbert nodded. I surveyed the entrance area. Stairs right in front of us, leading down into a dark, wet-smelling basement. A tiny hall leading into a kitchen. Living room to the left, dining room to the right. I gave the first floor a once-over. Dirty dishes in the sink. Magazines on the coffee table. The trash was empty. No bag. I went up the stairs and found the main bedroom, bathroom, and the guest room. In the middle of the guest room was a huge blood stain. It was flecked around the room, on the walls, on the bed. The stain was dark against the gray of the carpet. I surveyed the room. One bed, one desk with a small lamp and wooden chair, one plush armchair near the window, overhead light, fixture, fan. There was a closet and a nearly empty bookcase, short and pudgy. Maybe something that one of them had been dragging around for years, couldn't bear to get rid of. Some furniture held on to you. I walked in and thought about the room. The carpet was gray, the walls were white, but it was an off-white. It was like the white had been darkened by something. I sat down in the armchair and looked around, pretended I was staying there. I went over and turned the light on. The fan spun slowly above me. I sat back down in the armchair and looked some more. I realized it had been blue. The walls had been blue, but they had been poorly painted over, once, in a hurry. I got up from the chair and went over to the closet. Inside, there was a plastic bin full of wrapping paper. There was a broken vacuum, a box of empty bags to be used for gifts, and a stack of towels and blankets for guests. I reached out and touched the unused things, linens that had never been unfolded. So, no guests, or maybe guests slept on the couch. And this room, like many guest rooms, was useless. I leant down at the carpet in the closet. I took a small pair of scissors I kept on me and cut off some of the carpet threads, slipping them in my pocket. I sat on the bed, and it dipped, like it was trying to swallow me. The room smelt of dust, and the duvet was covered in butterflies. I lay down and stared up at the ceiling. What was missing in this room? And then I bolted upright and stared at the blank walls and realized there was less dust in a few places. Sections where things had been removed. Pictures. There were no pictures. Herbert was standing outside, trying to get the crowd to leave. I stormed out. "Are you sure this wasn't a robbery?" I asked. Herbert looked over his shoulder, annoyance on his face at my outburst. It made the dispersing crowd turn, new interest compelling them to stay. "Nothing has been taken." "How do you know?" I asked. Husband confirmed. "You don't think, just maybe, he's a little fragile at the moment?" Herbert shrugged. "I'll have him do another walkthrough." I told him I was going to need to come back to the house again. I needed to think. He told me to call him first, before he did. We both knew I wouldn't. But I looked up Noel Sharp on the internet. I found relatives and close friends, and I called and talked to them. Everyone had lovely things to say. I asked about her writing and her hobbies. When I brought up the husband, people also had nothing but good things to say. The mother was the only one who sputtered on and on about how that lowlife tricked my daughter into marrying him. Worthless career, no family money. She could have married a Rockefeller. I didn't tell her Rockefellers didn't spend time in Minnesota. I found their bank information, social media accounts, insurance. He had taken her name. Previously had been Magnus Brown. He had a brother named Leonard. I called and talked to some more people and asked if they ever had parties. Who were the best friends? Who stayed in that guest room? No one had much to say. There had been a housewarming party, but never another party after that. I called Leonard and asked him about Magnus and Noel. Leonard was still shocked about Noel's murder, kept going on and on about how Magnus adored her. Noel was such a sweet girl. She was so kind to everyone. Great cook. I never read her books, but I knew she was good. Magnus just loved her. I told him to call me if he thought of anything else. I could see from their joint bank account that there was good trouble. There always was. I carefully read through credit card statements, but nothing interesting sprung out. Not even a transaction from a dirty website. I sat by the window in my apartment, smoking until daylight. I waited a few days before going back to the crime scene. I called Herbert on the way to the house, and he told me basic things that I could have guessed. Death due to blood loss, internal injuries, no fingerprints on the knife or around the house, doors locked, nothing broken. Husband staying with a friend. Husband's alibi checks out. Yeah, he was painting a town over. I have the address. I'll take it, I said. I could hear the frown over the phone. I already cleared it with the homeowner. You called me, I said with a shrug that I knew he could hear. He rattled off the address, and I wrote it on a Walgreens receipt. I stopped at a Home Depot and stood in front of the paint chip wall. I stared at the colors, the very berry purple and Derbyshire green. I took out the carpet clippings and held them up over the grays. The carpet color was rock candy. I was at a shabby, buttercup yellow, run-down house that had not been painted in a long time. An old man in an old red sweater answered the door. He was hard of hearing, and his eyes were swallowed up so far into his face that I figured he couldn't see well either. I told who I was. Alma Savage, private investigator, and asked if he had made an appointment to have his house painted. He talked about how this nice fellow had painted his house, how they had drunk beer and talked about baseball. I was confused for only a moment before a young woman with a pixie face and curly hair interrupted us. My father has Alzheimer's, she explained. The house was painted a long time ago. I asked her if either of them had talked to the police. She looked confused. The old man had been the one on the phone with Herbert. I parked in front of the Sharp house and called people again and asked them to tell me things they remembered about Noel and Magnus. Memories were precious and often wrong, but sometimes they were the only clues one had to go on. Kathy Green was Noel's best friend. She hadn't been able to talk to me the first time I called. Now she was somber, and her voice wobbled, but she talked to me. I had dinner with them every month. Magnus cooked the best meals. Magnus, I repeated. What about Noel? Nope. Noel didn't like cooking. Whenever we were alone, we always ate out. Kathy kept talking, clearly happy to have someone to talk to. They wanted kids so bad, but Noelle had a miscarriage, and they never tried again. Magnus couldn't bear it. Had a vasectomy. I asked her when this happened. She said 4 or 5 years ago. I hung up and went back into the house, walking into the guest room and staring at it, realizing it was perfect size for a nursery. The schooner blue walls that had been painted over with Acacia white, the missing pictures, rock candy carpet. I lay on the couch in the living room and determined it was too uncomfortable for someone to sleep on overnight. No one stayed with the Sharps. I called Herbert, still lying on the lumpy couch. I need you to check something for me. Alma? Yes. I need you to tell me if she was pregnant. Noelle? Yes. I'll call you back. Chat. I went into the main bedroom and looked over the dresser, where receipts and change and dollar bills and earrings lay. I looked in their closet at all of Noelle's comfortable writing clothes and Magnus's paint-covered clothes. I found photo albums and thumbed through them. Nothing but happy smiles. I looked for medication in the bathroom. Nothing. I dug into drawers and looked through cabinets. Finally, in the garage, I found boxes, unlabeled. I knew it was what I was looking for. I opened them. There were 7 bikes, none matching, all different sizes. Each one had bright pink or bright blue toys, blankets, onesies, pacifiers. Each one contained a cross-stitched rectangle, homemade, Flora Sharp, Theodore Sharp, Maisie, Cooper, Rachel, Kevin. There were photos of the finished rooms, walls different each time. Pinks named Azalea, Flower, Teaberry. Blues named Gentle Aquamarine and Breathtaking. I looked down at the boxes, at all the attempts, all the miscarriages. Kathy Green didn't know about this. Her best friend status was weak, watered down because Noelle was too broken or embarrassed or just didn't think it was anyone's business. No one slept on the couch. No one slept in the guest room. I surveyed the rest of the garage and saw some large, framed photos shoved in the corner behind a lawnmower that was covered with a tarp. I went over and pushed the lawnmower away. They were prints of Noelle's book covers, the missing pictures, and there was a bloody thumbprint on the edge of one, her 3rd book, Dangerous Illusion. My phone rang. I answered it, hands shaking. Was she? I asked, throat dry. She was pregnant. Fuck, I muttered. What? Magnus had a vasectomy a few years ago. We'll confirm that on our end. And if you do? I asked. We both knew the answer. If he'd had the operation, it meant Noelle had cheated. It was motive. Doubt. I found Leonard's apartment the next day. When he opened the door, he was in a wrinkled t-shirt and boxers. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. His eyes were red, and his hair was unkempt. I told him who I was, and he let me in. He gave me a beer. It was warm. I chugged half of it in one gulp. When I swallowed, I asked, "So how long were you sleeping with her?" Leonard pretended to look confused. I waited. Then, after 4.5 minutes of silence, he put his face in his hands and started crying. I loved her so much. Magnus was always complaining, and she would come over and vent, and we'd drink, and we never meant to. Noelle was pregnant, I told him. His teary eyes grew smaller, beadier. Noelle had found out that day. I pushed on. She left the pregnancy test in the trash, and Magnus found it. You know, he had a vasectomy. I didn't wait for him to confirm. Noelle was in the guest room, looking at the nursery she never got, hoping it would work this time. It could be you. And Magnus found her, killed her, and took down the photos of her books. Couldn't bear to see them. All her accomplishments. She had money. Her name meant something. And now his own brother was fucking his wife. How did you know that Magnus isn't staying with you? He's staying with a friend. He hates you. No. He choked out, shaking his head, like that would shake the words out. She only cooked for you. When she came over here to vent and drink and fuck, she'd cook for you. She never did that with him. What do I do? He asked, drowning in how much he hated himself. I looked around the drab apartment before turning my eyes back to him, shrugging. Ever thought about painting the place? The cursed town. Content warning. Murder, suicide. He walked up through the dusty road which led to the small town of Tamans. It was twilight, and a light wind was blowing. Far away, the crop plantations acquired a greenish-orange color due to the light of the sun. On the other side, one could catch a faint glimpse of the Tiemens Church, with its tall steeple standing majestically high up in the sky. The yellow-orange hue of the sky washed the town, and the muddy red road was illuminated with a touch of gradient yellow. The whole town looked peaceful, and surprisingly, nobody was outside their houses. He entered the town and looked at the banyan tree in front of him. It had remained much the same. He looked up at the houses and walked towards them. Darkness was falling now. The red-orange hue was slowly swept away, and a dark blue color entered, only with a touch of crimson at its bottom. Shadows fell here and there, creating a spooky atmosphere, and he quickened his pace, as if to avoid the evil spell cast by the shadows of the houses. The moon came up, not too bright, for clouds were starting to surround it from all sides. He glanced upwards and realized that he had to take shelter somewhere. Rainfall could occur any time now. He walked through the dusty and muddy road and looked here around for inns, but there were none. Finally, he found a big apartment, which was deserted. He let out a sigh of relief and walked up the stairs and entered the apartment. It was evident that the apartment was still under construction work. It was not completed. However, years of neglect had withered away the raw smell of the brick walls, and small plants could be seen growing almost everywhere. All of them had a feeling of evil in them. The brick walls, the plants, the floors, and even the ceiling. It was like they had witnessed a lot of sad events and were telling him not to go further inside the house. The house itself was spooky, with its large corridors and almost no rooms. A huge, round staircase led to the other floors. The grayish appearance of the apartment matched perfectly with his gray and withered t-shirt and pants. He went up the staircase and reached the terrace. It was broad and wide, and one could see the beautiful town stretched before it. He looked down and was surprised to see an old woman with a lantern standing in the doorway of the apartment, waving her hands to call him. He descended the staircase and ran out of the apartment to meet the old woman. The woman was short in stature and had gray hair, with sometimes a tint of black in them. Her face was wrinkled, and she looked at him through her cat-green eyes, piercingly. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. "I am a visitor, and I came here for certain business matters. I could not find any inn to spend the night in, so I came here," he said. She looked at him suspiciously, and then said, "Okay, you better come with me. This place is not good, especially at night." He nodded his head and followed the old woman. He was cold with fear and could not understand what was happening. He followed her till they reached a cottage, and the old woman asked him to enter. He went inside and enjoyed the warmth of the fire which was lit. He sat down on a sofa, and the woman came to her with a candle. She placed the candle on the table and handed him a plate. "You must be hungry. Here, have some food. You better not go to the apartment anymore." "Why?" he asked. "It's a long story. I have seen too much of this world to remember happy deeds. Most are evil." "What do you actually mean? Do you want to hear?" "Yes, I do." She took a long, deep breath and then began. "Long ago, when I was about 17 years of age, there used to live a plantation owner named Hamilton. He had a lot of money and was very rich. You see those plantations? All those were Sir Hamilton's. He was not only rich, but kind and generous too. He used to donate with open hands. He had a beautiful wife, 4 daughters, and 1 son. However, naturally, his neighbors were very jealous of him and despised him. He did not care that much for that. But one day, his neighbors attacked his family. His daughters were of almost my age then, and the son was only a baby. They killed his daughters and his wife, but somehow Hamilton and his son were able to escape. "Why did not Hamilton inform the police?" he asked. There was no evidence against the neighbors. He had nothing to do. I later heard that he had fled somewhere to Canada. But how does it relate to the apartment? The old woman sighed. Her green eyes glistened, and she said the apartment was being made by Hamilton. He wanted to turn it into a hospital. Yes, but how does that matter anyway? Rain had started falling heavily, and the fire and candle went out. The two people were left in total darkness. However, he could still see the old woman's eyes glistening. The old woman said, "For the past few years, there had been a lot of suicides there. Many girls of around 16, 17 years are committing suicide there. It all started with the daughter of Mrs. Morpen. She jumped from the terrace we were standing a few minutes ago. The second case was of Mrs. Rayon's daughter. She was found hanging from the chandelier one morning, her face white and terror-stricken. He was taken aback and looked at the old woman with wide and fearful eyes. Lightning struck, illuminating the whole room for a moment, and he could see the old woman's face, ugly, wrinkled with a strong, piercing glance, which was almost witch-like. He wanted to run out of the house, but some strange power kept him rooted to his seat. The old woman said, "You better go to sleep now. I guess you had a very tiresome day." The old woman showed him his bedroom, and he fell down on his bed, immediately asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, he could see the sun shining brilliantly outside. He heaved himself up and went to the living room. The old woman was preparing coffee. She handed him a cup, and he sat down on the sofa. He drank from the cup the delicious, thick cappuccino and felt refreshed. He almost forgot all the horrible incidents from yesterday night. "Where do you want to go today? I can show you the way. It is evident that you are new to this place, as you were talking about inns in here. I have heard about Kingsman's Place here. Can you please take me there?" "Kingsman's Place? Okay, I will. It is a business center here. When do you want to go?" "About 9:30. What do you say? Please prepare a packed lunch for me." "Of course. Get ready then." He went back to his bedroom and took out his suitcase. He looked at himself in the mirror. He was middle-aged, but still, he looked pretty young. He brought out a coat, shirt, and pant and put it on. He looked the perfect businessman. After having breakfast, the two went out. On the way, they came across the Flint River. There he saw some girls whispering and talking together. One of them was extremely beautiful. Her fair skin with an orange tint made one remember pure milk. Her eyes were a deep blue, and she had beautiful black eyelashes. Her cheeks were pink, and her lips were a light red. Her mass of curls was thrown at her back, and she wore a pretty green dress. Her hands were well toned, and her legs were slender and well shaped. She looked a pretty picture. He stared at her for some time, and then she turned to the old woman and, pointing to the girl he asked. "Who is that girl?" The old woman glanced at the girl and then said, "She is Mr. Trudeau's daughter." "Pretty, isn't she?" "Yes," he said. "What is her age?" "About 17. He sighed and gestured at the old woman to move forward. They reached Kingsman S. Place, and the old woman left him there with his lunchbox. He did not wait there. As soon as the old woman was out of sight, he started running. He did not stop until he reached the old building. He entered and went up to the terrace. The terrace was absolutely empty. Despite being so large, the parapets were very low, and there were high risks of falling to death in case of an accidental slip. Unlike the rest of the house, almost no plants were there on the terrace due to some unknown reason. He roamed here and there on the terrace. He stepped very carefully, and whenever he looked down, he was sick at the sight of houses so far down below. He hated heights and was afraid of them. He went downstairs and waited. "You know, Laura, I will go to Grandma Fontaine's house today." The words kept ringing in his mind. To reach Grandma Fontaine's house, she had to cross this building. There she was coming, alone. Nobody was with her. He waited silently, and as soon as she came in front of the apartment, he gripped her hand and pulled her inside. Before she could scream, he put a handkerchief under her nose, and smelling the chloroform, she fell unconscious. He now prepared for it. He dragged her upstairs to the terrace and carefully washed her face. He then threw her down the parapet, and she landed with a loud thud sound. Dead. Yes, she was dead. Blood was flowing from her, and her pretty face was peaceful. He quickly fled from the place before anybody could see him. He did not return to the old woman's house. He kept walking towards the outskirts of the town. It would take him almost 3 hours to get out. He had seen his own sisters and mother get killed in front of him. Those Morpins, Rayons, Trudeaus, and Greys have killed them out of jealousy. He and his father had somehow fled. But after some time, his father also died. He died saying, "Kill Morpin, kill Trudeau, kill Rayon, kill Gray. Don't let them live." He had done that. He had killed all of them, except Gray's daughter. He would be back for her after the next 4 years. Yes, he would not let her live. They do not deserve to live. They had destroyed his life. He would destroy theirs. He would not let them be happy when his own happiness had been snatched away from him. Never. He looked back at the town. It was twilight yet again. The town looked peaceful, but he could hear faint sounds of crying. Let them cry. They will have to cry again after 4 years. He turned and walked away from the town as darkness fell and made the town silent. The dark night. A shadow of a figure was running in the dark. All around were tall trees, and only a small fraction of the moon's rays got through the canopy. The ground was a black void, with no difference between the dirt and the tree roots. A pack of wolves howled in the distance. With every gust of wind, the tree branches and leaves banged and rustled like a toddler playing with pots and pans. Under all of that was a low mumble, rhythmic like a drum cadence, but ghostly in origin. The figure trips. Eli. The scene quakes. Eli. The moon disappeared. Elijah. Blinding fluorescent light replaced the woods. 13-year-olds Eli and Tyler were sitting in the mall food court, eating dinner across from each other. Eli's heart was pounding in his ears, and his hands trembled. Tyler put her hands on his. Eli, what did you see? Eli repeatedly blinked back at her as the fog lifted from his head. I don't really know. Come on, she said, slinging on a side bag as she raised from her chair. You can think about it on our way home. I don't want to miss the bus. Without a word, Eli cleaned up their table and carried the tray away. As soon as his hand was free, he reached for her hand. They walked away from the tables, with Tyler locking her arm from Eli's swinging. Not too many people were left in the mall. There were a few stragglers around the pop-up stands, but most were lacing their arms through jacket sleeves by the exits. However, two men, a twig-like one with close to the head African curls, and a log-like one with slicked hair, mostly to one side, didn't fit in either group. They stood off the side, away from everyone else, surveilling, looking for something. Their cookies and cream vibe didn't make Tyler divert their path. She was right until they stepped into their way. Excuse us, Tyler Woodlock and Elijah Krieger, the twig one asked through a British accent. Tyler pulled Eli closer. No, sorry, she answered, starting to walk around them, with her and Eli's fingers turning red. Government agents? The other man stopped them, flipping open his budget case. Miss Woodlock. The Brit slid closer as Tyler gave out a nervous laugh. She pulled it together with a devious smirk. All right, agents. She stepped closer. But one thing first. Yes, the man said, putting his budget back. Tyler gave the Brit, the fitter one, a stiff kick in the shin. With him on the floor and his partner stunned, she yelled, "Run, Eli," giving Eli a push start. Eli sprinted off, getting a head start as Tyler toppled over a supply case. He headed for the loading docks, a path Tyler forced him to memorize for an emergency like this. As ordered, he ran without looking back. He nearly ran off the truck port in his mindset. He jumped down. Falling on his hands, he looked like a frog. He couldn't find the strength to stand, but he walked, half-crawled, to the rear of the building. Collapsing against the brick, he took his chance to look back. She wasn't there. He stayed twisted around the corner, waiting for Tyler. All of a sudden, bright light beamed onto him. Drawing Eli's attention, the voice called out, "Stay there!" They boomed like a drill sergeant. He clambered to his feet and did the total opposite as the voice commanded. A stampede of boots followed Eli as he jotted into the wooded area on the other side of the loading lane. The fall night grew darker as he was chased farther in the woods. With every gust of wind, the tree branches and leaves banged and rustled. Their movement shifted and blocked the moon as if in a game of peekaboo. This and the uneven ground made Eli bobble like a pinball. The voice rang out again. "Get him! Don't let him get away." It allured him to look back. A light show of flashlights was going on behind. Even with all the light, however, the people remained shadows. A gopher tunnel tripped Eli up a bit. As he looked up, a pair of amber eyes, low to the ground, stared at him from a few yards away. The progression of howls following the encounter made Eli run fast. He couldn't hear the boots anymore. He would turn his head a few degrees before forcing it straight. The last one sent him flying into the ground. Tyler peered over a row of bushes. Eli laid on the ground, with only his chest moving up and down. As soon as she raised from her position, two men came into view. One went to Eli's side, and the other pulled out a radio. Asset found, about 4 clicks due east of the loading dock. The radio guy looked around the perimeter as the second man searched Eli's pocket. Tyler fished around in her bag. In the dark, the inside of her bag was a void. She felt cold metal as more men appeared. The one left Eli's side. "The cards aren't here, sir." Eli let out a moan as he began to stir. "Bring him. We'll find out soon enough where they are." He turned and started the procession away. Radio and Pocket Man gave each other a glance before Pockets threw Eli over his shoulder. The remaining men followed. Tyler took her hand out of her back. She fell to her knees, with her hands on her face. As the first tears started falling, she wiped them away with her fists clenched. She ran back to the mall, heading towards the parking lot. Her head bubbled back and forth, looking at the cars and people. Losing her structure, she fell back on her knees. She started crying again, right before her ears perked up. Snapping her head around, she saw the 2 agents from inside. "We lost, ma'am," she heard the agent who threw his badge in her face. They were ready to run. A grin grew across her face. She spined back, with her attention being grabbed by the rear of the car she fell in front of. The license read, CA exempt 387690. She had seen enough of those when the police raided their Romani dwellings. The odds of that being their car, she didn't know. Not did she know the odds of them automatically unlocking it far enough away that she could climb into the trunk before they were close enough to see. The two agents and their unknown guest arrived at their motel on the outskirts of town almost an hour after Eli was taken. The building wasn't too big, just 2 rows with 8 or so doors each. Behind each were a single room and a bath. The agents went first. Tyler waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before pushing out the back row cushion. Sitting on the floor of the car, she watched as they entered a room with the number 6 on the door. She opened the door carefully so she wouldn't hit the next car. In the same manner, she closed it without a sound. She strategically stepped as she reached back into her bag. After peering into the room's window, she saw the 2 agents with their backs to the door. There seemed to be nothing but a wall in front of them. But that didn't bother Tyler. She walked right in and pulled her hand out of her bag before slamming the door shut. The agents jumped if shots had been fired. They found that they weren't too far off. Dropping their phone, they were face to face with a gun barrel. "Hello again, miss." "Woodlock," one agent said through his British accent as they snuck for their weapons. "Don't patronize me," she said, cocking her gun. "Do you think you can pull yours before I shoot the both of you? I've already proved I have grace under pressure." They both bring their hands forward. "What do you want?" the other one asked. "Well, Agent Vincent Petrov, I'm thinking about a trade." Flaunting his arrogant British accent, he asked, "What would you have that we would?" Cutting him off, Tyler pulled out a deck of tarot cards. "Really? I might be a child, but I'm not an idiot." "That still doesn't answer my question," Vincent said. "I want Eli back." "Excuse me, even if I believe for a second you're not with the men who took him, you bring him back to me, and you get these no-so-meaningless cards, and we all live happily ever after." The agents gave each a glance. "Let me make this easier. You do this, or I shoot you and go on my merry way." Eli was groggy, teetering between awake and asleep for the car ride, though no one could tell through the blindfold, nor from his position in the trunk. They had tried his wrists and ankles to stop the little fight he had in him. No kicking, no hitting, no running. More helpless than he was without Tyler. He was asleep when the car stopped, but was jarred awake when one of the men yanked him out. Being bobbled around, his face was red and breathed deeply, trying to keep dinner in. The only relief came when he was dropped to the floor. After the bang of the door, Eli was left to wait once more in the dark. He pulled at his ropes, only stopping when the burning turned into paper-cut sensations. No closer to freedom, he crumbled, stopped straining, stopped fighting, stopped holding it together. Back at the motel, Tyler sat crisscrossed on the first bed from the door, yanking her locket back and forth on its chain. She stared at the agents that sat on the other side of the room. She tried to hear what they were saying, but they put the same effort into the opposite. "What are we going to do, Miles?" Vincent asked. "Play the game." "Easier said than done," We know when, where, and a fair idea of by who. The who is what scares me. I would be more scared of the lass if we don't. I agree with Agent Walker. A woman, dressed in a white skirt suit with her dark hair in a spiral braid, said just inside the room, "Ms. Isles?" Vincent jumped out of his seat. Tyler did the same. She stared at the woman, jotting a glance at the door, then back. No one heard the door open or closed. "Hello, miss." "Woodlock," Ms. Isles said, raising her hand. "Hi," Tyler said, more like a question than a snipe, without shaking her hand. "Well, do you want the good news or the bad news?" "Good would be best," Vincent toddled. Isles looked at Tyler. "Find the boy. Bring him back. Finish your original mission," she said through a smile. She began to walk away. She already had her hand on the doorknob before any of them stopped her. "What about the bad news?" Miles shouted. "Work with her, Walker. Work with her," she said, leaving before and without argument. Eli had no idea how long he was asleep for, but when he opened his eyes, he was met with a blinding light. He stretched out to find his legs and arms unbound. Panicked and joyed, he shuddered and jostled. He missed the hand on the wrist. A shadow eclipsed the bright light. "Do you mind not moving?" The voice sounded familiar. With the light masked, Eli could start to see the room. First, the man kneeling in front of him, graying hair, flannel button-up shirt, and placid blue eyes. Then small red spots on the gray cement floor. And last, white bandage roll, some on his right wrist, and the man wrapping more onto his left. "I think you've bled enough on my floor for today," the man said, finishing his work. "Your floor? Don't be put off by the casual dress. I'm the boss here. And that's why I can offer you this. You answer all my questions, and you can go home to your gypsy family, to your sweet wife, Tyler, without any more harm." "What do you want to know?" Eli asked as he sat up. "Why don't we start with something simple? Why did you run away from me at the loading docks?" said the man who glared a flashlight in Eli's eyes earlier that night. Vincent sat at the small two-person table, glaring at a street map and a calculator. "How is it going, Vince?" Miles asked, leaning over Vincent's shoulder. "Not great. Knowing that they took Elijah 75 minutes ago, and assuming they stayed within 5 miles per hour of the speed limit, they can be anywhere within and around 50 miles away from the mall. That's a big area. You don't know the half of it." "Miss Woodlock." "Tyler!" she yelled at him. "My name's Tyler." "Tyler." He put his hands up halfway. "Can you give us anything? Car model? Direction? Anything?" "I was a little busy, trying not to get caught myself. Trying to find you fools. If we try to search all of this..." Vincent pulled Miles closer and lowered his voice. "We won't get to him in time." "Don't talk like that!" Tyler yelled, with a little cry behind it. "You start talking like that, and things will end that way." She fell back onto the bed, with her hands on her face. Miles glared down at Vincent, with his arms crossed. He kept that position as he walked over to the bed. Sitting next to her, he put his arm around her, with an air bubble between them. "Thanks," she said, whipping her hands out from her face. "It's getting late. Why don't you rest for a bit? We don't want our sharpshooter's eyes heavy. I've been one for the last 10 years. But," she paused, bringing up her watch on her right wrist. "Watch," she continued, jumped off the bed. "What?" Miles followed her towards Vincent. "Watch." She started searching her bag. "I got Eli a watch for our first anniversary. He never takes it off." She presented the watch's instructions. "And it has GPS. Anniversary?" they asked. During their time together, the man asked Eli an array of questions. Most about trivial personal things to get Eli relaxed and uncoil from his balled-up position. It was working, too. He was as relaxed as if he was home. His eyes glassed over as the questions droned on. The room faded away. A dark place appeared. A spotlight shines on the center. A glint of metal moved in from the bottom. A gun, revolver, a white hand, a flannel sleeve. The hand snapped the bullet holder back into the gun. It aimed, destroying the image. The shot fired caused Eli to scream and hold his ear. His ears were still ringing when the man tried to calm him down. Eli saw what he expected was on his own face, on the man's. The man removed Eli's hands. His mouth moved, but Eli couldn't hear it. He yanked himself away. "Why are you asking me all these questions? What do you want?" The man had a blank face. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. After straightening his shirt, he said, "You have something that belongs to me." "I don't have anything." Eli shuddered. "Not now, but..." He exhaled heavily through his nose. "Tyler gave you something. A set of tarot cards." "I don't know where they are," he stuttered. "Well, it's the last question you have to answer, so give it a good thought. They could be anywhere. In the woods where you chased. Back in the mall where the other two did. With," he said, trying to put the brakes in his mouth. "Sir, you know where they are." No, I don't." "Yes, you do." He pulled a gun from his back waistband. "Tell me." Eli's mouth opened, but the only crashing noises came. The sound made both of them jot their attention towards the door. The man gritted his teeth. The other two. Staring down at his gun, he weighed it in his hand before bringing it down on Eli's head. Eli fell to the floor again. The last thing he saw before the backs of his eyelids was the man's black shoes walking out the door. The black gave way to wisps, at first merging into cacti and sand. They whirled by through the view from a car window. Tyler sat on the opposite side, smiling back. In the front seat sat Miles and Vincent. The whole picture felt loving and had a dream-like glow. It faded into a face full of fabric. Before he could freak out like his earlier ones, a hand touched his shoulder. "You're all right now? You're safe," Tyler cooed. In a quick movement, Eli raised to hug her, nearly bringing them to the floor. Regaining her structure, she hugged back. In their embrace, Eli missed Miles and Vincent standing off to the side, smiling down at them. The sins that betray us. It was a warm Parisian evening, and fog rose from the Seine. It mingled with the smog of industry and clouded the gas street lights that dimly lit cobblestone streets. Beside the Seine, in the 4th arrondissement, was La Force prison, within which was the man Eugène Vidocq, whose wrists were shackled to the dungeon wall by cold steel chains, and ankles bound by manacles. Eugène had black, curly hair and long, thick sideburns that taunted the corners of his mouth. He wore rags. His nose was still bruised from the scuffle. To detain him when 5 men were needed to pin him down and capture him. "Monsieur," he said, speaking to Julien de Veria, the Parisian chief of police. "I became a criminal the night my father had me arrested as a boy. When those gendarmes had turned up and taken him away to a cell that night, he had felt betrayed, devastated, and humiliated by his father. Above all, he had felt angry, and that anger had stayed with him all his life, a chip on his shoulder that had been ever present in his interactions and informed his life choices." Julien sat in the opposite corner of the dungeon on a wooden stool. His top hat lay in his lap, and his walking cane leant against the wall. He remained as still as a gargoyle. "Your trial for treason commences at first light, and you wish to reminisce about your father. Do not waste my time." The flame of torches lining the walls flickered. A rat scurried between iron bars and retreated into the shadows. "I have watched the guillotine sever the head of my dear friend César Herbeau. This cannot be my fate." He shook his head. The surprised look upon César's face as his head fell to the ground was forever etched in his memory. He could not shake it, could not recall how César used to smile, or the jovial times they had shared in local brothels. "You have deserted from the army. You have stolen, you have forged, and you have destroyed marriages. Why would I care about your fate?" Orange from the flickering flames glinted in Julien's eyes. A distant scream echoed around the chamber. It briefly registered to Eugène, like the sound of a new prisoner being subdued into his iron attire. "Monsieur, I crave a life no longer on the run," said Eugène, thinking of his recent arrest. His estranged wife, who left him for a soldier, had found him back in Paris and reported him to the gendarmerie. He could never be free while the sins of his past stalked his being. "Such is the fate of a criminal. Why would I care about what you crave? You are wasting my time," Julien said, snatching up his cane and smashing it against the stone wall. He stood, Monsieur, s'il vous plaît, let me tell you what I can do for you, so as not to waste any more of your time. Julian pushed out the backs of his jacket and sat carefully on his stool. Proceed. Thieves adore me. Hardened wretches esteem me. I drink and mingle in their circles. I have their trust. I know their hearts. I will gather their secrets and share them with you. We have informants already. Why would I need you, monsieur? I will be the best of them all. Of your informants, do any have as much esteem amongst the other criminals? Of your informants, have any been as cunning as me to escape prison so many times, even dressed as a nun to avoid detection? Sir, I will go to lengths those simpletons could not even imagine imagining. I will be your best informant, monsieur. I know this without a doubt, and I think you do too. I can't trust you, monsieur. When my late father had me arrested as a boy, my fate was sealed. In my mind, I became a criminal. It has taken my whole life to realize he did that out of love. I can be different. I can be of use to society. I can be the man my father knew I could be. I don't know if you can, monsieur. I've seen the end. I've seen my friend's head freed from his body by guillotine. I know that God's grace has all but kept me alive. I will be as devious as I was in crime, but use those skills to catch the criminals and make Paris safer. He shook his head. Just as the rats carry the plague, I fear you spread a vile truth. Monsieur, s'il vous plaît, just give me one last chance. Please. Julian was silent. We will hold off your trial in the morning. But know this, you are one mistake from execution. I want intelligence, actionable intelligence, or you'll be seeing your father sooner than you had imagined. He stood, gathered his cane, placed his top hat on his head, and waved to a guard outside the cell to let him out. Eugene put his head back on the stone wall and blinked away a tear. He would be tireless. He would be disciplined. He would use the tricks and the cons and the black arts he had learned. It was clear that Julian barely believed what was said, but that was fine, because he knew what was there in his heart. And it was true, and with time, he would prove it. He felt the anger that had fueled his heart for so long start to thaw. The miserable wretch that was his soul felt a flicker of hope. His father had loved him and had wanted him to be the best he could be, no matter how tragically he had tried to teach that lesson. And now he understood that it was only ever a lesson. He could become the man his father knew he could be.